So I wanted to start by saying that the reason I'm here on Budget Committee, and really why I think we're all here, is to provide the district with the resources to deliver a quality education at a reasonable cost to the families of our community. And you know, everyone wants a good result out of this. Everyone wants Timberlane to deliver quality education. Now, at 2014 deliberative, I asked the question, how much is enough? We've got enrollment declining year by year, and we've got spending increasing year by year. And I asked, is the superintendent or was the board at that time willing to say how much resources are enough? What resourcing goal are they trying to achieve? When would they say there's enough? Each year, all I see is the request for more money. So what I'm going to try and do here is answer the question, how much is enough? Thank you. What I'm going to try to show is how Timberlane can plan resources by leveraging the example of comparable high-performing districts that have similar composition, that they're nearby, similar number of students, service kindergarten through grade 12. Using those comparable districts as an example, I want to show how we can have ample resources for an excellent education in line or better than comparable districts, begin a long overdue resizing of staff levels to recognize declining enrollment, protect 100% of our special ed teachers and aides, bring transparency to how we budget our contingency, and allow taxes to be lowered for all the towns in our district. So first of all, let's look at enrollment. Enrollment is declining very strongly. From 2007 and 8, which was our peak enrollment, which was when kindergarten was introduced, until now, it's down 19%. That's to the current year, 14-15. Now, to the next year, the year that we're budgeting right now, we have two forecast decreases. The administration last week said that we're going to be decreasing by 40 students. There's a NESDEC forecast which says we're going to be down by 160 students, which is down 4.2%. So we're going to be down in the range 1.1 to 4.2%. Now, if we look out to the future years, our forecast decrease going 5 years out is another 13.7%. So declining enrollment isn't a one-year phenomenon or a two-year phenomenon. It's a long-term trend. And 5 years from now, we're going to be looking at a district under 3,200 students. At the same time, our costs are increasing. Now, obviously, the costs I've only got going from 2007-8 through to 2014-15. So over that span, our budget is up 17.1%. Our per pupil cost, because remember, our budget's going up 17%, but our number of enrollments, our enrollment number is declining. Our per pupil cost to this year is up 44%. Now, I'm going to say that this year, the current year per pupil cost is an estimate. The costs up till and including last year are our official numbers. So we're and that's this green line here. So the orange line through to last year, official costs, we're at 14,000, I think 14,400 last year, and we're going to be over 15,000 this year based on the budget and enrollment that we have now. Now, district likes to compare itself to statewide averages, and that's pretty routine. You can see this in the district report card that's been updated for 2014. So we have cost per pupil, Timberlane 13,329, the state 13,459. So we're a little below the state, but that's for 2 years ago, which is the last year that the state has its numbers out for. The statewide numbers are only available up until 2012-13. So our cost is still going up very rapidly from this 2012-13 number. Student-teacher ratio, 11.3 compared to a state average 12.1. Well, that's as of the 13-14 year. Picking a couple of NECAP scores, grade 11 reading, we're at the state average. Grade 11 math, we're a little below, but pretty close. Problem is this: New Hampshire has over 160 school districts with average enrollment of around 1,150 far-flung rural populations in very small schools. It doesn't make any sense to compare Timberlane to a state average. It's not a fair comparison of costs, resources, or results. There are only 9 districts in New Hampshire that really are pretty comparable to Timberlane. They're in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 students. They service grades kindergarten to 12. They don't tuition their high school to a separate institution. So there are only a dozen, and you know, they have 6 schools, 7 schools. We have 7 schools. You know, Rochester has 11, but it's not a wide population to compare to. Next slide. Let's look at the comparable cohort in terms of resources. Student-teacher ratio. The average of our comparable districts is 13.5. Timberlane is 11.3. The state average, 12.1. So compared to the state average, we look like we're a little bit low. We're more teachers to students by a bit. But compared to the average of our cohort, there's a big gap, 13.5 compared to 11.3. And it makes sense. These are districts that have the similar economies of scale to what we do, similar compactness to what we have. Again, similar story on cost per pupil. Timberlane at 13,329, well, compared to a state average, we're a bit under. Remembering that's 2 years ago. Compared to the average of our cohort, we're $1,000 per pupil high. And that's 2 years ago, 2 years where our costs have gone up, especially on a per pupil basis. Our costs have gone up rapidly. Now let's look at results. Again, instead of looking at state averages, we look at the comparable districts. Our grade 11 reading, grade 11 math is somewhat below the cohort in reading and significantly below the cohort in math, 33 compared to 40. And there are huge numbers of NECAP results. I picked NECAP grade 11 reading and math because to me grade 11 represents an end point of the education. It sort of represents an end result. Kids have been with the district through their school years. Here's where they end up. Reading and math, I figure, are both reasonably objective measurements, and everyone has to do the tests. So I think that these are probably reasonably decent comparisons. What's interesting is when you look at which districts had better results than Timberlane in both reading and math. And I've decided to call that the leading cohort. So there are 5 districts that did better than Timberlane on both counts. And you can see them there. You know, I'm not going to read the slide line by line. But when you look at that leading cohort, the NECAP grade 11 reading average was 83 compared to 75 on Timberlane. So we're well behind. Grade 11 math, again, 45 for the leading cohort compared to 33 for Timberlane. So we're well behind. So 5 districts comparable to us, similar size, similar composition, distinctly better NECAP results.
Mr. Green, we're over 10 minutes, just so you're aware.
Thanks. Now we look at the leading cohort resources. When we take the student-teacher ratio, when we take the cost per pupil of the leading cohort, we have far more students per teacher. We're at 11.3 in Timberlane compared to 13.4 for the leading cohort, and we're $1,000 high on cost per pupil. And those are all the districts that are getting better results in the end than Timberlane. Where I want to go with this is that when you look at the resources that we put in and compare it to similar districts with better results, those districts are getting superior results with far fewer staff. Timberlane should be capable, equally capable of performance, equal or better than current performance, while emulating the staffing model of comparable districts. In other words, there's no reason that taxpayers should need to pay for the level of resources we have when we've got neighboring districts that are getting better results with far less. And to quantify that, we could take a staffing model based on the target student-teacher ratio of 13.4, which is the average of that leading cohort. And if we took that, the result on our staffing would be that we could budget a staffing level 76 full-time equivalents below what we currently pay for, and still have more staff resources than comparable districts producing better results, and still protect all of our special ed. So how can it be that there's room for 76 staff reduction and still have better resources than comparable districts? Well, we've had 7 consecutive years of declining enrollment. Keep your eye on the red line. And there's the staffing level. 4 different measures of staffing, and you can see the red line going down, all the other lines stay level. The first line, the top blue line, that's staff positions. That's the number you'd see if you open the Timberlane annual report. And it's in the range of 720, around that number. Changed very little since 2007, 2008. The gold line, the next one down, is the staff in full-time equivalents. Just under the 700 mark for most of this time. It was just under 700 here, and it's just under 700 here. The green line, this is teacher positions. Again, you look in the annual report, this is what you'll see. About 400 teachers, pretty much level through that whole period of time. Finally, the brown line is teacher full-time equivalent. Now that one does dip a little bit, which is kind of interesting because full-time equivalent teachers down a little bit, but full-time equivalent staff total hardly changed at all. I think there's some classification counting things going on there, but that's a separate discussion. The main point is hardly changed at all, certainly not comparable to the decrease in enrollment. Put the same information essentially in numbers. Enrollment down 16%, staff positions down 4%, staff full-time equivalent 0. And by the way, I'm comparing based on 2008 to 2014. And the reason I chose 2014 rather than 2015, I don't have full numbers for 2015. I have almost, but I don't have full numbers for 2015. Teacher positions down 2%, teacher full-time equivalent down 5%. So you can see staffing has in no way kept any sort of proportion to enrollment. That's why our student-teacher ratio has gone so low. That's why our cost per pupil has gone so high. And that's why the difference between what we have in staff and our comparable districts is so big that we could shed 76 positions and still have better resourcing than comparable districts that are giving better results.